Well, we've heard today that political parties, opposition parties, are adding their voices. The EFF saying that the president should step aside while what went on in his farm in February 2020 is investigated. We know the president has confirmed that money was stolen. He said this was proceeds from a game auction. Money was stolen, but he's adamant that he has done nothing wrong. So let's speak now to the head of legal and investigations at Corruption Watch, Karam Singh. Karam, thank you very much for your time. You watch corruption, quite literally. You know when things are not looking good. So for you, what are the red flags around this farm story for you?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Sally, and thanks for having us on the program. I mean, I think the initial red flag is a basic concern that the president, as head of state, has active business dealings that are going on. It's not clear to us to what extent this has been fully declared, and the extent to which the president has put kind of arm's length mechanisms in place, a kind of blind trust, such that he's not actively running the businesses. The second concern or red flag is the fact that we're dealing with a transaction which involves significant amounts of cash. As we know, if I, as a common person, were to walk into a luxury goods store or an auto dealership and pay for something with large sums of cash, that it would trigger obligations on the vendor's side to report that to the Financial Intelligence Center and to SARS. So how is it that the president's business dealings involve these large sums of cash? Is this something that we understand to be a regular practice in the cattle trade? And then the additional red flags are the issue around the foreign currency. We know that it's not common practice for businesses to receive foreign currency, that there are exceptions that are allowed for this, particularly in the tourist industry. And then the final red flag is the fact that the president didn't bring us into his confidence when this happened in 2020 and alert the public to this. While we don't have evidence at this stage that there's been a cover-up, and certainly the president's spokesman has said that he's on the side of transparency and that there is no cover-up, it certainly seems to be the case that if Mr. Fraser had not made this, laid this charge and brought publicity to this matter, that as the public, we would be none the wiser. So, a lot of red flags. And I think we need to give the president an opportunity to bring us further into his competence to understand what steps he's taken to avoid conflicts of interest from his business dealings.
And it's such an interesting news cycle because, of course, there's this story that involves the president, and at the same time, just days later, we hear about the arrest of two of the Gupta brothers, very much seen as the architects of state capture in South Africa, and there's volumes of evidence that's come from the State Capture Commission that will have to be obviously tested in court if they are brought back to South Africa. But how significant is it that we've heard of an arrest now? Is it important psychologically for us as a country, even though we know there's going to be a lengthy extradition process?
No, absolutely, Sally. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. The problem with the corruption narrative is the fatigue that sets in, day out, hearing allegations, hearing stories, and then the public feeling that there's no real progress. So, even the Zondo Commission, which I think was an absolute triumph when it came to the notion of transparency, there's a frustration, that at the end of this very expensive commission, that it doesn't automatically translate into justice outcomes. It would be incorrect to place that burden on the commission. That was not their responsibility. The pressing for accountability now lies with law enforcement, with the police, with the prosecution services, with bodies like the SIU. So, when we see actual arrests taking place after a long process, we know that there was a serious negotiations around finalizing the extradition treaty with the Emirates. We know that last year already the red notices were issued for the Gupta brothers and their wives. So to actually now get to a point where we've had arrests has to be cheered and has to be seen as something which is progressive. But obviously, that's not the end of the story. And if the Guptas are not successfully extradited, and if that following that extradition, they're not successfully prosecuted, then it would be a hollow a victory along the way. So as you say, there's still a lot that needs to come.
How problematic is it that the man who seemed to be on a mission to clean up state capture, to stop the rot within his own party and in government as a whole, now is potentially involved in somewhat murky dealings? Is it something that just messes with the neat narratives, the good guys versus the bad, that we want? How do we understand it in our mindset of this was the person we had hoped would be making big changes for our country?
Yeah, no, I think I think the good guys versus bad guys narrative doesn't take us that far. I think, there's been a lot of criticism broadly across the leadership of the governing party for years. The current president was in the cabinet, during the height of state capture. We can't deny the positive developments that have happened in the last few years. The putting the MPA back on the right track, putting SARS back on the right track, fully supporting the Commission of Inquiry. So, we have to have a factual basis for evaluating the bona fides of the current administration when it comes to the fight against corruption. But obviously it does muddy the waters. And I think these are the kinds of allegations that are going to be with us over this period, particularly in the run-up to the leadership contest that we expect to see later in this year. There are lots of people, including implicated persons like Arthur Fraser, who have an interest in not seeing this president's anti-corruption agenda succeed. So that doesn't mean that everything that comes out of Mr. Fraser's mouth can be dismissed, but we certainly know that allegations emanating from a source like that are vested and that they're particular interests. So let's move beyond the good guys, the bad guys. Let's deal with all the allegations as they come. Let's ensure that proper investigations take place and that there's due process and that the hard questions get answered.
Karam, I just wanted to ask you one question. It's news that's just come in. It's the National Prosecuting Authority is confirming that Jacob Zuma has been unsuccessful in his attempt to push for a prosecution of advocate Billy Downer. This, of course, relates to his, and we're talking about slow wheels of justice, to the allegations he's facing around the arms deal in the 1990s. As someone who's well versed in legal matters, I wonder if you could explain the significance of this. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's the Nolle Prosecu certificate. What does it mean? Does it really open the way now for this corruption case to go ahead against Mr. Zuma in the middle of August?
Look, it would seem that all the efforts by Mr. Zuma's legal team to somehow try to disqualify Billy Downer was a red herring, was an attempt to delay the inevitable day in court that former President Zuma has to have, the day in court that he demanded very early on, when the prosecution wasn't going forth. So. I think we're going to we're going to get to the end of the road at some stage on these delaying tactics, and President Zuma must answer these charges. But I think what I'm more interested in seeing is when are the new charges going to be laid against President Zuma? We've seen now charges laid against the Gupta brothers. We've seen the skeletons of the state capture project laid bare in the report, and we know very well who have been the masterminds of the state capture project. That being the Gupta brothers and former President Zuma and those his close associates. So I think the time has come, and the time will come shortly when new charges, former President Zuma will have to face new charges for his period in time presiding over an era of state capture. But I think the delaying tactics with regard to Billy Downer have probably now reached their end.
Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening, Head of Legal Investigations at Corruption Watch, Karam Singh.